The Drowsy Chaperone is a musical with book by Bob Martin and Don McKellar and music and lyrics by Lisa Lambert and Greg Morrison. It is a parody of American musical comedy of the 1920s. The story concerns a middle-aged, asocial musical theater fan. As he plays the record of his favorite musical, the 1928 hit The Drowsy Chaperone, the show comes to life on stage as he wryly comments on the music, story, and actors. The Drowsy Chaperone debuted in 1998 at the Rivoli in Toronto and opened on Broadway on May 1, 2006. The show was nominated for multiple Broadway and London Theatre Awards, winning 5 Tony Awards and 7 Drama Desk Awards. The show has had major productions in Toronto, Los Angeles, New York, London, and Japan, as well as 2 North American tours. History: The Drowsy Chaperone started in 1997, when McKellar, Lambert, Morrison and several friends created a spoof of old musicals for the stag party of Bob Martin and Janet van der Graaf. In its first incarnation, there was no man in chair, the musical styles ranged from the 1920s to the 1940s, and the jokes were more risk or copyright. When the show was reshaped for the Toronto Fringe Festival, Martin became a co-writer, creating Man in Chair to serve as a narrator-commentator for the piece. Following the Fringe staging, Toronto commercial theatre producer David Mirvish financed an expanded production at Toronto's 160-seat, independent theatre Passe Muraille in 1999. Box office success and favourable notices led Mirvish in 2001 to finance further development and produce a full-scale version at Toronto's 1,000-seat Winter Garden Theatre. During that production, Linda Ntoy, associate producer of Mirvish Productions, invited New York producer Roy Miller to see the musical. Miller saw potential in the show and he optioned the rights. With Canadian actor and fundraiser Paul Mack, Miller produced a reading for the New York's National Alliance for Musical Theatre on October 5, 2004 and invited Broadway producer Kevin McCollum. The reading captured McCollum's interest and eventually resulted in Miller, McCollum and Bob Boyett, Stephanie McClelland, Barbara Freitag and Jill Furman committing to producing the play. An out-of-town engagement followed at the Armanson Theatre in Los Angeles, and after alterations, The Drowsy Chaperone opened on Broadway on May 1, 2006. Synopsis: The man in chair, a mousy, agoraphobic Broadway fanatic, seeking to cure his non-specific sadness, listens to a recording of the fictional 1928 musical comedy, The Drowsy Chaperone. As he listens to this rare recording, the characters appear in his dingy apartment, and it is transformed into an impressive Broadway set with seashell footlights, sparkling furniture, painted backdrops, and glitzy costumes. Man in Chair provides a running commentary throughout the show. In the opening number, Fancy Dress, the premise and characters of the show are introduced. It's the day of the wedding of oil tycoon Robert Martin and Broadway star Janet van der Graaf, who plans to give up her career for married life. Those in attendance include aging hostess Mrs. Tottendale, her loyal employee known only as Underling, Robert's best man, George, Broadway producer Feldseegg, who is hoping to persuade Janet to forego marriage and continue starring in Feldseegg's Follies, Ditzy Flapper Kitty, who hopes to take Janet's place in the Follies, 2 gangsters disguised as pastry chefs, self-proclaimed famed Latin lover Rodolfo, Janet's alcoholic chaperone, who is supposed to keep her away from Robert until the wedding, and Trix, an aviatrix. The gangsters reveal to Feldseegg that their boss has invested in the Follies and wants to make sure the show is a financial success, which it presumably will not be without Janet. They tell Feldseegg that he must sabotage the wedding and make sure Janet stays in show business. Feldseegg enlists the vain, easily manipulated Rodolfo to seduce Janet and spoil her relationship with Robert. Meanwhile, in his room, Robert realizes that he is nervous about the wedding. To get rid of his cold feet, he tap dances, and George, who is also nervous, joins in the dance. George notes that tap dancing could be injurious, so he suggests that Robert go roller skating in the garden instead, while wearing a blindfold to keep him from seeing Janet. Outside by the pool, Janet tells reporters that she is happy to be getting married and ostensibly doesn't want to be an actress anymore, but her song evolves into a big production number. In Janet's room, Janet is having doubts about whether Robert really loves her, and she asks the chaperone for advice. The chaperone responds with the extemporaneous "As We Stumble Along," a rousing anthem to alcoholism, which, Man in Chair explains, the original actress playing the chaperone insisted on including in the show. More helpfully, the chaperone tells Janet that she is feeling drowsy, and must take a nap, giving Janet the opportunity to ask Robert if he loves her. Janet leaves for the garden, and Adolfo enters, mistaking the chaperone for Janet. The chaperone happily pretends to be Janet and allows Adolfo to seduce her. Janet meets the blindfolded and roller skating Robert in the garden, and she pretends to be a French woman, Mimi, from the middle part of France, where they make they toast. She asks Robert how he met his bride, and he describes their love-struck first meeting. Carried away by his emotions, Robert kisses Mimi, because she seems just like Janet. Janet furiously storms off because Robert has kissed a strange French girl. Kitty, hoping to take Janet's place in the Follies, tries to demonstrate her mind-reading talents to Feldseegg, but he is unimpressed. The gangsters confront Feldseegg, threatening him with a murderous Toledo surprise, because he has not yet succeeded in cancelling the wedding. Feldseegg distracts them by insisting that they actually have singing and dancing talent, and they turn Toledo's surprise into an upbeat dance number. Adolfo, with the chaperone on his arm, announces that he has seduced the bride and the wedding is therefore cancelled, but Feldseegg angrily tells him he has seduced the wrong woman. Janet announces that she is cancelling the wedding, and Robert protests in vain that he only kissed Mimi, because she reminded him of Janet. Man in Chair announces that this is the end of the first act and the first record of the two-record set. He puts on another record, saying that the audience can listen to the opening of the second act of The Drowsy Chaperone, and leaves for the restroom. A scene set in an Oriental palace appears on stage, with characters in stereotypical Oriental costumes and the chaperone costumed as an Englishwoman in a hoop-skirted dress. Man in Chair hurriedly stops the record, explaining to the audience that that was the wrong record. It was the musical The Enchanted Nightingale, not the second act of The Drowsy Chaperone. He finds the right record, and The Drowsy Chaperone continues. In a musical dream sequence, Janet laments her lost romance and decides to return to the stage. Mrs. Tottendale tells Underling that the wedding will proceed as planned because love is always lovely in the end. She reveals to Underling that she is in love with him. The chaperone announces that there will be a wedding after all, she and Adolfo are getting married. Mrs. Tottendale announces that she and Underling are getting married as well. Robert tells Janet that he loves her, and she admits that she was really the French girl and agrees to marry him. To appease the gangsters, Feldseegg tells them that he has discovered a new star, Kitty. He asks her to demonstrate her mind-reading talent, and when she reads Feldseegg's mind, she announces that he is asking her to marry him. George, now best man for all four weddings, realizes that he has failed at his most important task, finding a minister. Trix lands her plane in the garden, announcing she is about to depart for Rio. Because a captain on board a ship can perform marriages, everyone rationalizes that Trix, as a pilot, can perform marriages on board a plane, and she can fly them all to Rio for their honeymoons. As the record is about to play the show's final chord, the power goes out in Man in Chair's apartment, and a superintendent arrives to check the circuit breakers. The power returns, and the final chord plays. Alone in his apartment, a disappointed Man in Chair begins singing As We Stumble Along, and is gradually joined by the cast of The Drowsy Chaperone, who cheer him. Musical numbers, Overture Euro Orchestra, Fancy Dress a Euro Company, Cold Feets a Euro Robert, George, Show Off a Euro Janet, Company, As We Stumble Along a Euro Drowsy Chaperone, I Am Adolfo a Euro Adolfo, Drowsy Chaperone, Accident Waiting to Happen a Euro Robert, Janet, Toledo Surprise a Euro Gangsters, Feldseegg, Kitty, Mrs. Tottendale, and Company, Message from a Nightingale a Euro Kitty, Gangsters, Adolfo, Drowsy Chaperone, Bride's Lament a Euro Janet, Company, Love is Always Lovely in the End Mrs. Tottendale, Undling, I Do in the Sky Tricks, Company, As We Stumble Along Company. The original cast recording contains 2 bonus tracks titled, I Remember Love, which is a duet between Mrs. Tottendale and Undling, and Message from a Nightingale, which is the unabridged version of a portion of a song that is cut short in the show. I Remember Love also contains a ukulele solo by ukulele as Mrs. Tottendale. It was replaced by Love is Always Lovely in the End. Show within a show concept. The concept that the audience is listening to the musical on an old LP record is used throughout the show. As he listens to the show, Man in Chair is torn between his desire to absorb every moment of the show as it unfolds and his need to insert his personal footnotes and his extensive but trivial knowledge of musical performances and actors, as he frequently brings the audience in and out of the fantasy. As the show goes on, more of his personal life is revealed through his musings about the show, until, as the record ends, he is left again alone in his apartment but still with his record of a long-beloved show to turn to whenever he's blue. At one point, the record skips, which causes the last notes of a song to be repeated until the man in chair can bump the turntable. A power outage near the end causes the stage to go dark in the middle of the big production number. Despite the show within the show being a 2-act musical, the Drowsy Chaperone is played without an intermission. At the end of the show's first act, the man in chair observes that there would be an intermission if we were sitting in the Morrison Theatre, watching the Drowsy Chaperone. Which we're not. His monologue at the musical's intermission point ends when he changes records, then leaves the stage to use the bathroom. The new record is actually the second act of a different musical by the same composer and librettist, starring many of the same actors. Message from a Nightingale is performed in costumes evoking imperial China, with the performers displaying cliched Chinese accents and mannerisms. The man in chair returns to the stage and replaces the disc with the correct one for Act 2 of the Drowsy Chaperone. Parodies of musical comedy, the plot incorporates mistaken identities, dream sequences, spit takes, a deus ex machina, an unflappable English butler, an absent-minded dowager, a Broadway impresario and his follies production, comic gangsters, a ditzy Corinne, a harried best man, and Janet's Drowsy Chaperone, played in the show within a show by a blousy grand dame of the stage, specializing in rousing anthems, and not above upstaging the occasional co-star. Productions Broadway The Broadway production opened in May 2006 at the Marquis Theatre, and closed on December 30, 2007 after 674 performances and 32 previews. Directed and choreographed by Casey Nichol. The original Broadway cast included Bob Martin, Sutton Foster, Georgia Engel, Edward Hibbert, Beth Level, Troy Britton Johnson, Jason Kravitz, Garth Kravitz, Eddie Korbick, Danny Burstein, Lenny Wolpe and Jennifer Smith. Notably, Bob Saget took over the role of the narrator toward the end of the run. West End The Broadway team staged the West End production. Preview started on May 14, 2007, first night was on June 6, but it closed on August 4 after fewer than 100 performances. A largely British cast, including Elaine Page making her return to the West End after 6 years John Partridge and Summer Strawlin joined the show unregistered trademark co-author Bob Martin recreating his Broadway role of man in chair. Joseph Alessi, Anne Rogers, Nicholas Grace, Nick Holder, Selena Chilton, Sean Kingsley, Adam Stafford, Cameron Jack, with Nina French, Paul Iveson, Mark Goldthorpe, and Sherry Berrington. Later during the run, TV star, Steve Pemberton took over the role of man in chair, whilst understudy, Nina French took over as Mrs. Tottendale. Novello Theatria unregistered trademark owner Sir Cameron Mackintosh, who had seen the show in previews in New York, had supported its transatlantic transfer. London's critics were generally optimistic about the show, although some had been less impressed. Even an early drastic reduction in the cost of premium seating for the show failed to generate sufficient enthusiasm for the production, and the producers closed it in August instead of the scheduled February 2008 date. London's The Stage commented shows in London can run safely at lower capacities than they require on Broadway but, as the transfer of the Drowsy Chaperone has just proved, sometimes even a Tony-winning Broadway hit can't unregistered trademark to even achieve that. The musical received 2008 Olivier Award nominations for Best New Musical, Best Actress in a Musical, Best Actor in a Musical, Best Theatre Choreographer, and Best Costume Design. North American Tour A national tour of the Drowsy Chaperone opened September 19, 2007 in Toronto at the Elgin Theatre. Among the performers were original Broadway cast members Bob Martin and Georgia Engel. While Engel performed with the company for the extended engagement, Martin did not continue beyond Toronto. His role was taken over by Jonathan Crombie. Nancy Opel played the role of the Drowsy Chaperone. The Drowsy Chaperone played more than 30 cities in the United States, including Los Angeles at the Armanson Theatre, where the show ran before going to Broadway. Subsequent Canadian productions The Vancouver Playhouse Theatre Company mounted an independent production of The Drowsy Chaperone directed by Max Raymer, musical directed by Lloyd Nicholson and choreographed by Dana Tkach in Vancouver, British Columbia. It opened November 27, 2008 and ran until December 27, 2008. The cast of this version included Jay Brazeau, Bill Mallison, Debbie Timmis, Led McIntosh, Gabrielle Jones, Neil Miner, Sean MacDonald, Mark Burgess, Nathalie Marable, Nora McClellan and David Marr. In July 2009 the Thousand Islands Playhouse mounted another independent production, directed by Catherine Mackay, choreographed by Dana Tkach, with musical direction by Sandy Thorburn. In co-production with Canada's National Arts Centre English Theatre, the Vancouver Playhouse Theatre Company's production of The Drowsy Chaperone directed by Max Raymer played on the Shocter stage of the Citadel Theatre in Edmonton, Alberta, opening on September 5 and closing on October 4 and thereafter played at the National Arts Centre on November 1, 2009. However, musical director Lloyd Nicholson died of a heart attack on the eve of the first performance in Ottawa, causing the production's run in that city to be truncated slightly as a couple of early performances were cancelled. On January 7, 2010 the Manitoba Theatre Centre in Winnipeg opened its co-production with Theatre Calgary, with Calgary dates set for the following season. The show will be produced by Medicine Hat Musical Theatre in April 2016. Japanese production The first translated production of the musical opened in Japan on January 5, 2009. Australian production The Australian production, staged by the Melbourne Theatre Company, opened for a limited engagement in Melbourne on January 21, 2010. Prominent Australian actor Geoffrey Rush played Man in Chair. The production was announced to run through February 20, but due to impressively high demand for tickets when they were first made available, the producers arranged for it to continue through February 27. CLOC Musical Theatre in Melbourne, Australia will present The Drowsy Chaperone in September/October 2015. Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts will present The Drowsy Chaperone in March 2016. Subsequent fringe productions Ovation Productions and Alex Siegel presented a fringe production Upstairs at the Gatehouse directed by Raki Plouz, musical supervisor Michael England, choreographed by Fabian Alois, casting by Ellie Kalia Bristow September 23 October 31, 2010. The Blue Hill Troupe staged their version of the production from November 9, 2013 at the theatre at St. Clement's on New York's Upper West Side, directed and choreographed by Stephen Agosto, musical director and conductor Andrew David Sotomayor and set design by Alexander Tepper. Brazilian production The Drowsy Chaperone was first translated to Portuguese in 2013, and performed from August 17, 2013 to June 29, 2014 in São Paulo City. In the cast there were popular Brazilian musical actors such as Ivan Parent, Sarah Sars, Stella Miranda, Solo Vasconcelos, Chiara Sasso and Andres Amasu. It was staged on Teatro Popular do SESI, and it was the first time a great musical show had its free tickets, due to sponsorship. Bermudian production Bermuda's Gilbert and Sullivan Society presented The Drowsy Chaperone at the Earl Cameron Theatre, City Hall, Hamilton, Bermuda from October 1 to 10, 2015. Cast members included Philip Jones, Nancy Thompson, Kelly Gilmore, Robbie Godfrey, Maxwell King, Will Kempe, Nicole Crumpler, and Sloan Wilson. Cast recording: a one-disc compact disc set by the original Broadway cast was released in 2006. Although it contained mostly only the musical numbers, it also contained enough of the Man in Chair's narrative to provide a taste of his role. On Valentine's Day 2007, a limited edition 1000 pressing vinyl record version was released, available only on the Ghostlight Records website and in the lobby of the Marquis Theatre. This edition, which included only the musical numbers, along with extra specially recorded dialogue, was meant to recreate the album listened to by the Man in Chair. Principal roles and casting: notable replacements, Joanne Wryly and Cindy Williams as Mrs. Tottendale, Mara Davy as Janet van der Graaf, Peter Bartlett as Undling, Jonathan Crombie, Bob Saget, and John Glover as Man in Chair. Notable replacement: Steve Pemberton replaced Bob Martin in the role of Man in Chair from July 10 until the production closed on August 4. Awards and nominations: Original Broadway production Original London production References. External links: The Drowsy Chaperone at the Internet Broadway Database, Production, The Drowsy Chaperone working in the theatre seminar video at AmericanTheatreWing.org, April 2006, Drowsy closes early in the Capitol Euro Society of London Theatre, July 9, 2007, The Drowsy Chaperone at the Music Theatre International website, Bob Martin a Euro Downstage Centre interview at AmericanTheatreWing.org, June 2006, study guide from Tuts.